LSST, the Government of India that inspires to create an enabling environment for equal participation of women in the STEM fields at all levels, while addressing the deep rooted problems. Now I'll pass on to Ishan to introduce Michelle. Thank you.
Thank you, Komal. Welcome everyone. I am Ishanwali Ghosh. I would like to introduce Dr. Michelle Lochner to you all. She is a senior lecturer in the Department of Physics and Astronomy at the University of the Western Cape, South Africa, as one of the principal investigators of the South African Legacy Survey of Space and Time, also known as LSST. She is working to develop machine learning classification algorithms to handle the large number of transients that LSST will detect in the near future. Michelle is also the founder and the program director of the Supernova Foundation, along with Dr. Ghazal Khestidzani and Dr. Valeria Petorino. The Supernova Foundation is a global organization that supports and promotes women and gender minorities who are pursuing a career in physics from all around the world. The organization aims to provide personal mentorship by established women physicists for women students as they transition to postgraduate studies. It also connects and provides a support network for women across the globe at different stages of their career. As of October 2020, the Supernova Foundation had 107 mentors and 271 mentees from 53 countries all around the world. I will now hand over to Michelle to talk about the brilliant organization that she founded. Go ahead.
Thanks so much. All right, let me just share my. I need to be able to share my screen. The host needs to give me permission for that. But I'll, in the meantime, start by just thanking Kamal and Eshamoli for inviting me to give this talk. It's really great to virtually be here. Let me see. There we go. Right. I'm just going to move the Zoom controls. And apologies for this. I want to just open the chat. Okay. So if I can just ask all of you a favor, I don't think I'm going to talk for a full 45 minutes or whatever. So if anyone has any questions while I'm speaking, whether you want to ask about the Supernova Foundation, ask about mentoring, being a woman in physics, or just general physics and astronomy career questions, whatever comes up for you, feel free to type it in the chat. I'll probably only get to it at the end, but it's much better than having this silence at the end of the talk while we wait for people to ask questions. So if something comes up for you, just feel free to put it in the chat and I'll get to it at the end. Okay, so I wanted to start with just introducing myself a little bit, although I don't think I need to add too much to what Ishamoli already said. But basically, who am I? This is a picture of me. I assume this group is mostly undergraduates. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So this is me when I was a first year in the physics department with my then boyfriend and now husband, Emil, and my best friend, Adrian. And at this point, they were throwing out a bunch of computers, and we were just starting to play around with electronics. So this is us taking them apart to figure out if we could get any useful components and bits out of it. So that was kind of where I started, or kind of my equivalent to where you guys all are at the moment. So this was when I did my undergraduate at Rhodes University in South Africa. And I went on to do all my postgraduate studies at the University of Cape Town. And I'm back living in Cape Town now. But I did do a stint overseas. I did postdoc, 2-year postdoc at University College London before I came back to South Africa for it was a kind of semi-permanent position, and now I'm in a permanent position as senior lecturer at the University of the Western Cape. So this is a pretty standard kind of career trajectory for someone in physics. And I've always loved astronomy ever since I was a little kid. So I'm quite delighted to be in a career where somebody was actually willing to pay me to be an astronomer. And I will also point out that part of my desire to start the Supernova Foundation came from my experiences as an undergraduate. Not that they were particularly negative, I had many wonderful friends, but I was always the only woman in the class. And that continued even, so my postdoc at UCL was quite special. There were quite a lot of women, especially postdocs and senior PhD students, but also quite a few faculty. And that was amazing for me because it sort of made me realize that this is what a normal department should feel like, actually, when we have real gender equality. And then when I came back to South Africa, I was back in a group where I was once again the only woman. And so it was through this journey that I started to realize, I really started to feel that this was very unnatural. And I wanted to do what I could to try to combat gender inequality, specifically in the field of physics, but in STEM fields in general. So why a mentoring program? Why do we even need this? So this is a nice figure I took from a very, very comprehensive UNESCO report looking at the gender gap specifically in STEM fields. And you can see that, and this is across all sciences. So this includes like biological sciences, for instance, where we know that there's a better representation of women. So you can see that at the undergraduate level, you actually get roughly equal numbers of males and females. But by the time you start getting to postgraduate level, there's a huge gender disparity. And in certain fields, this gap is present much, much earlier. Even in an undergraduate level, as many of us I think would have experienced, there's a big gender gap in physics and in maths and in quite a few different fields, different sciences. So this is often referred to as the leaky pipeline, where at each stage of the career, women drop out disproportionately to men. So you tend to retain men and lose more and more women. And there's quite a range of reasons for why this might be happening. But the idea is we want to try to build a program that really helps to retain women who would otherwise leave. I mean, obviously everyone has the right to whatever career they want to choose, but we want to try to prevent women leaving physics simply because they are in the minority and they are feeling isolated, etc. So that was kind of the motivation behind this. So how do we know that mentoring is even a good idea at all to try to fix this problem? Well, there's a few interesting resources that I've pulled together over the years. I really liked this paper, which was a study of mentoring programs, specifically women, junior women having senior women role models. And they concluded that having these role models acts as a kind of vaccine. So a kind of way to fight against feelings of isolation, stereotypes, many of the negative experiences that women have. So even though you're still in a minority, you're still struggling with a lot of the issues that women face in physics, it kind of has less of an impact because you have this role model. Subconsciously, you have this somebody that you can see yourself becoming. So it really seems to help mitigate those kind of feelings. There's this big UNESCO study that I mentioned. They have quite a few different possible issues that women and gender minorities do face. But one of the solutions they do propose, one of many, is actually mentoring is an option, something that seems to be helpful. And then there was this interesting study done about trying to find out why certain women stuck with it and managed to graduate with their PhD and why some left. And one of the key indicators was receiving good mentoring. So if a woman received good mentoring, and it didn't differentiate between receiving mentoring from a male or a female role model, but they tended to stick with the field if they had this good mentoring. Okay, so where did all this start? It actually started quite a long time ago around this program called the Immersion Mentoring Program that I headed up. And it was actually an idea by my colleague, Prof. Bruce Bassett. And he had been involved with the University of Mauritius for quite a few years and kind of trying to encourage some of the students to come over to South Africa and study astronomy. And he always had a lot of success with the male students, but could never actually get any of the women students to actually continue their careers and pursue this. And he thought that mentoring would be something that could help specifically. So he invited me and a number of his women colleagues to basically connect with some of these students remotely, have one-on-one mentoring sessions, and just be there for them, be a role model. And it did work, at least in one case. So my mentee actually did come over and did her master's, and then went on to do a PhD in the UK, and has now got a very successful career. So at least there was one success case. But this was a very small program. We had 7 mentees and I think about 6 mentors maybe. And it was a very sort of small scale. But I realized after doing this for a while that this idea has no limitations really, other than the limitations we put on it. And this is something I could easily, it's such a beautiful idea that Bruce came up with, just virtual mentoring, right? So it's very scalable. And so that was when I had the idea to go global and to relaunch the program as the Supernova Foundation. And so this is a link to the website. Our foundation, basically, this website does a lot of work. Our entire foundation runs through this. And here's just an example of some of our mentors from all over the world. So these are all women who have a PhD already in a physics-related field and are employed in some way related to physics. So, and these are examples of our mentors. This is a wonderful leadership team who I rely on quite heavily. We've already heard about Gezel and Valeria, who are my right-hand women, and Leila as well, and actually my mother, of all people, who's helping out doing some of the administration. And we're in this very exciting transition at the moment where the foundation is now so big that we're trying to build in new governance structures to make sure it can keep going even if the leadership team decides to retire. We also have a very active and wonderful social media team. They've actually just recently had a great social media drive for this occasion, which is Women and Girls in Science, the International Day of Women and Girls in Science. It's basically Claudia, who's an expert in science communication, and a bunch of very enthusiastic mentees in the program who help maintain our presence on social media, which is great because it's not something I'm very involved in. So I'm grateful to have other people helping out. So we have mentors from all over the world, as you can see from this map. So the blueness is a measure of how many mentors we have. So we have quite a lot from North America, from Europe, quite a few from South America. It's no accident that there's a lot in South Africa and in India as well. And the mentee, and you can see the breakdown of different countries here. Lots from the US, South Africa, UK, but really very, very global, all over the world. And the map of our mentees is a little bit different. There's still some from North America and Europe, but you see much stronger presence from South America, Africa, and a wonderful large contingent of Indian mentees who are very involved in the program. So this is not accidental. We do have a focus on the more developed countries, but we know that for most developing countries, it's less likely that a woman undergraduate is going to have senior women faculty to act as role models to them. So we hope to kind of bypass this with our virtual mentoring. You can see the breakdown of countries here. That's a very large segment from India, a nice big segment from South Africa, but really all over the world as well. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what the Supernova Foundation actually is. I've kind of been talking almost around it. So at the moment, as of the other day, we take applications continuously, so this number keeps changing. But we have 237 mentees and 115 mentors representing 54 different countries. So we have a very active Slack team. And if I send a message that says @channel, it always warns me I'm about to notify people across like 17 time zones, which is kind of cool. It's kind of an indication of how global we really are. So it's open specifically to women and gender minorities. We don't have any men as mentors for very specific reasons. And we're still looking into, there are lots of, obviously you want to be welcoming to men who consider these gender equality issues to be a problem and want to help. So to kind of expand the network for others. But at the moment, it's really only women and gender minorities who can join the program. We focus on all fields of physics. The largest percentage is in astronomy, not by chance. Also, all the founders were all astronomers, so it tends to be within our network. We want to eventually expand to cover all STEM fields and include fields kind of outside of academia as well. Looking at things like industry, data science, etc. So the way it works is that at the moment, each mentor has 2 mentees and they meet once a month for private mentoring. We're looking at restructuring so that mentors can actually have more than 2 mentees, because we have very, very high demand on our mentors. There's a very long waiting list. So we're trying to restructure it so that is much better. So it's all virtual. We were doing things remotely before it was cool, before the pandemic. And so it was great because we managed to make it through the worst of the pandemic pretty much unscathed. So mentors will meet their mentees, who could be anywhere in the world, usually about once a month for roughly an hour, private mentoring. And they talk about things like career advice, maybe any issues that the mentee is facing in her studies, like challenges with a supervisor or things like that. We might help out with stuff like look over a CV or look over a project proposal, that kind of thing. So it's not about like helping you finish your studies or whatever. It's really more about directing your career and just having somebody there to talk to and share her experiences. We also have, which is very popular, the regular webinars. Well, I say here roughly 2 months. It's maybe 2 to 3 months is about the frequency. But these are great. So, I mean, we have all these amazing mentors with lots of experience between them. So we bring them together for webinars on particular topics. And they're quite informal, but we hear from a variety of mentors about things like work-life balance, CVs. The ones that are often in high demand are very much career advice type webinars, but we've also had some quite impactful ones, for instance, talking about something called imposter syndrome that is pretty prevalent in academic fields, but is particularly bad for women. So these webinars they're all recorded, and they're a resource that's made available to the mentors and mentees within the Supernova Foundation. Okay, I'm just going to pause there for, let me just see. Sorry. Yeah, okay, let me go through this and then I'll pause. So throughout this journey, what are some of the things that we've learned? Well, I think the thing that I realized is that this kind of online community really works. It's really effective. And what's great about it is you don't need a lot of effort. You don't need a lot of energy. You just open up your computer, chat to someone, maybe have a webinar or two. And it goes such a long way to combating those feelings of isolation. So what you guys are doing here is really great. And just having a space where women and I think fairly equivalently any kind of minority group within a larger group, having a space where you feel like you can express yourself and talk about the issues that you face is really positive. And the program has been amazing, especially if you're in these very male-dominated environments. A key thing that we realized early on is there has to be a good measure of self-organization so that we don't have to put in lots of time and energy to make things happen. Mentors connect with mentees themselves through the website, and then they meet themselves, and then we just gather feedback to check that things are still going okay. So the program has been able to scale with almost no funding and with quite a lot of effort, but only from a very small number of people. And one thing that we realize is important to make expectations very clear, because everybody has different ideas of what mentoring could mean. So I mentioned like helping you with your studies. Some mentees think that's what a mentor is for. It's like a tutor to help you through your studies. That's not it. A mentor is really there as a role model. So that's been also particularly important because we have so many different cultures represented, people from so many different walks of life, and everybody comes with their own preconceptions. So having a very high degree of sensitivity to those cultural differences has been really important. And finally, I mean, I think everybody needs mentoring at some point in their careers. Like one of the things I've found amazing for the Supernova Foundation is being able to connect with women who are more senior than me, and just being able to share experiences and having a space to kind of vent when something bad happens. You know, if you have a bad experience at a conference and you've got somebody to talk to about it. So I think peer mentoring can be incredibly powerful, and I think everybody needs it. So just building this kind of network is really valuable. Okay, before I go on, I just wanted to pause for a minute and see if anybody has any questions. I don't see anything in the chat, but I'll wait a couple minutes and see if there's anything.
Hi, Michelle. I had a question. Can I? Yeah.
Yes,
So as you mentioned about comparing mentoring to a social vaccine, so how many doses does one need of the social vaccine, to go through this entire discrimination or all this trauma about being a group part of a minority group in this academia, and for all this
yeah,
pressure, how many doses do you think one may need?
that's a great question. I think it's like the COVID vaccine, you know, effectiveness wanes over time. You've got to keep boosting. So I think that's why we find it important to maintain regular meetings, even if the mentee comes and says, "Oh, I actually don't have that much to talk about," even just to connect, just to remind you that there is somebody there for you if you need it. So I think that connection is really important. And what we find is obviously the more senior the mentee gets, usually the less input they need. You know, the more confident they're becoming, the more sure of their career they are. But even so, you know, some of our mentors are postdocs, and postdocs actually also need quite a lot of career advice. So that's where the kind of peer mentoring is really important. So I think at any stage of your career, wherever you are, it's just important to know that there's somebody there for you. I mean, I have my own mentors from my own career, not through the Supernova Foundation, and I rely on them. You know, something will come up that I haven't faced before, and I'm not sure what's the right move, and I'll just check it out with one of my mentors. So I think everybody needs somebody like that in their life. And in terms of how often you need to take that shot of the vaccine, it's probably fairly dependent on where you are and what your career level is. But it's definitely not enough to just, hear a talk by an inspiring woman scientist and now I'm fixed forever. You
Yeah.
really do need that continuous support, which is why it's so bad that so many of our departments are really isolating if you are from a minority group. Good question.
Yeah, I mean, like, sometimes we think, okay, things are going fine, but then randomly there come many situations where we act like very clueless. Okay, like what to do in the situation? Why am I feeling very helpless? Why is something not working out? So yeah, I mean,
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, the great thing with the Supernova Foundation is sometimes something will come up and your mentor might be like, well, I don't know. I've never applied for PhD positions in the US, but because it's such a big network, you can post a question on Slack, and usually there's somebody there who will have some idea about it. So I think it really is a case of like making sure there's people there when you need them. I think that's the most important aspect.
yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Michelle.
Pleasure. Any other questions?
So, if there are no other questions from the chat, I would like to ask one of my own.
Go for
So,
it.
Uh, we know that the apparent imbalance of women in physics, especially in theoretical fields and say pure mathematics, it's very much evident as opposed to other fields in science like biology or chemistry. Would you say that it is that much more important to have good connections and a supportive mentorship network in these certain fields compared to others?
Yeah, definitely. I think the more the more of a minority you are, the worse those feelings of isolation get. And the more likely you are to drop out of the field. So it's unfortunately it's this vicious cycle where let's take women specifically now, but this applies to feeling like a minority in any aspect. So there's been some interesting studies in companies where they find if there's very few women in the company, they feel very isolated and they're more likely to leave until you hit a critical mass, which is quite large. It's 30 to 40%. Once you reach that critical mass, then it's okay. Then women are much more likely to stay and it's sustainable. So you have to put in a lot of effort to actually reach that critical mass. Otherwise, you just keep losing women. And so I think um, these kinds of programs are really important and are more important if it's more of a minority. That's not to say that a woman in biological sciences, for instance, doesn't face discrimination. And in particular, even if undergraduate is the field is more even, as you get more senior, you see it in certain fields. I mean, certainly I see it if I go to specialists. You know, I might have a woman, there might be lots of women GPs, general doctors, general practitioners, but you know, I've never met a neuroscientist or a neurologist who's a woman. So there's clearly still discrimination at higher levels in even those fields that we think are better represented. So it's not to say that there isn't discrimination, but I do think that the more the worse the gender equality is in a field, the more important these kind of programs are. And this is also why I'm very supportive of, you know, things like women's lunches or you know, just groups where women can meet and chat to each other. Even though by nature I hate excluding people, it's just it really helps to remind you that there are other people like you out there in this particular, they're like you in this particular aspect, and that you can act as role models for each other and get some of that vaccine to mitigate those feelings of isolation. So I think yeah, I think it's important, and I think it does grow with importance the worse the equality is, inequality I should say.
Yes, I would certainly agree with you on that. I think that is why it was so much more important to have established women in STEM mentoring women rather than a general mentorship program, including mentors from other genders as well.
Yeah, this was definitely our feeling, and it is tough because obviously there are a lot of men out there. For instance, I mean, the whole idea for virtual mentoring came from Ahmad, who was a colleague of mine. And so there are lots of men out there who really want to help, who see this as a problem. So it's just about figuring out how to include them. But I think it's really important for our mentees to have a role model who is similar to them in this one particular aspect. Any other questions? All right. Okay, so I mean, this is just some. I thought it might be quite nice. I mean, there's not. I can certainly answer lots of questions and have lots of discussions about our experience in the Supernova Foundation, but I mean, this isn't a science talk, so there's not lots of graphs and things to show you. But I thought it might be quite nice when I was putting this talk together. I wanted to share the voice of some of our members. So we have nearly 400 members. That's a lot of people. And I wanted to kind of bring them in because I'm not the Supernova Foundation. The Supernova Foundation is all these wonderful women. So I gathered some kind of advice from the mentors and mentees, and it's specifically advice about mentoring. But I think it will be really useful for you guys to think about with this kind of program. I'm going to paraphrase some of the longer ones, but this is something from Gezel, who's really one of our founders and one of our most integral members, and on the leadership team. But her point is basically that, and she's very vocal in supporting women, especially in theoretical physics, which is her field, because some of the reasons we have these kind of problems is because institutes are not necessarily doing enough about equality, and she thinks that the emphasis should be, or the responsibility should be with the institutes to support these kind of programs, because these programs only exist because there's the lack of inclusion in the first place from the institutes themselves. So it's a very bold statement, putting the pressure, as it were, on the institutes to do more. And like one of the meaningful ways that these institutes can be supportive is actually to compensate for time of people who volunteer to participate in these kind of initiatives, because it's seen as very much a kind of add-on, or nice to have. Oh, you do a bit of outreach, okay, that's nice. Instead of seeing it as really important service work for the entire community. So one of the things she thinks that institutes should do is to actually compensate and recognize this kind of work. So this is advice from one of the many MSc students who wanted to remain anonymous. But she said that it's important that if you have a mentor-mentee relationship, that you acknowledge and maintain respect for each other, regardless of your background, regardless of various properties, and bring in empathy in every situation. And I think that's really, I see it all the time with the mentoring of my own mentees. I think it's really, really critical. My advice to, and I mean, even though you are undergrads, you're starting out your journey, you are looking to mentorship, but you're also mentoring each other. You also may have opportunities to mentor young people who come after you. And something that really hits me with the Supernova Foundation, with the mentoring sessions that I have, is even the smallest amount you can do will have a big impact. Just having that empathy, just taking that time to just listen to somebody's problems that they might be facing, maybe give some advice, maybe just be an ear and just be there for them. I think it has a huge impact. It has a disproportionately large impact relative to the effort that you put in. So one of our very active mentees, who's actually just finished her PhD, she says that having the point of view of an external person who might have experienced the same situation but is a little bit separate from you can really help. And I think this is one of the most valuable aspects with the mentoring program, that this is, in the Supernova Foundation, your mentor is somebody probably in your field or in a related field, but not your supervisor, not your mother, not somebody close in your life. They're a bit more external to you. And so it can be really valuable just to have the point of view of this external person. This is quite specific to mentoring, but just encourages being prepared for the mentoring session. I mean, I think this is maybe just generally useful advice, that if you're having a meeting, particularly with somebody more senior than you, always think about what it is you hope to get out of the meeting. Maybe draft a few talking points. Just think about what's your kind of end goal for the meeting, and it will go a lot more efficiently then. Anna, who's my mentee, actually, she talks about how it's important to, and again, this is very useful for any kind of mentoring type relationship, where it's important to understand what your expectations are of each other, what you actually need from mentoring, etc. Elena also pointed out one of the things that she really enjoyed about mentoring is she found out that the world is so different in terms of career prospects, because her mentor is from a completely different country to her, when she'd never been to, didn't know anything about, and so really kind of broadened her horizon in terms of what else is out there and how people do things differently. And I think that's one of the strengths of the Supernova Foundation is really, truly quite global. I really like this, that one of our very active mentors, Leah Morabito, mentioned. She said, it's good to remember that you are more than your job. And I think when you're a student, this is also particularly important to remember. You are more than the degree you're pursuing, you know, whatever thing you're doing. But especially when you start your postgrad studies or when you get a job, just because somebody says this is a good thing to do doesn't necessarily mean it's a good thing for you. So have your goals and be clear of what your goals, and remember that they do change with time. Don't chase something that you thought you wanted 3 years ago if it's no longer your passion. I think that's really, really good general advice. And something that I always stress to the mentors and the mentees is that, because it's very easy, because there is this power imbalance for mentors to give mentees advice and for the mentees to just accept that advice as if it is absolute truth. And yes, it's important to seek advice from people who have experience and to hear it, but at the end of the day, you have to choose your own path. And your path might be different from what somebody else thinks it should be, but it's your path, and it's up to you to decide which way it goes. One of our wonderful and also very active mentees, Priel, she advised to the mentors that they put themselves in the mentees' shoes, and you'll always find the solution to the problems. And I really like that. I think when mentoring, I often hear issues from my mentees, and I think, oh yeah, I was just like that. I remember going through this sort of thing. So it's very easy to empathize and to see that same kind of career path. This is something that for your program specifically, you might want to take into account that confidentiality is very important. So having a mutual agreement of confidentiality because when we're discussing issues about what it feels like to be a woman in physics, for instance, or woman in science, to be a minority, this comes up. This is often connected with some things that might be quite private, might be quite personal, and difficult to share. So if you're trying to create a safe space, a safe sharing space, which I think is what you need to get that vaccine, you do have to make sure you agree beforehand to confidentiality, and to also recognize you're there to support each other and help each other, but you're not counselors, you're not psychologists. So there are definitely boundaries. And another thing that Priel said, which was very sweet, advice to the mentors: you don't need to win big prizes to be an inspiration to your mentee. Being your best self with kindness in your heart is best for inspiring the younger generation. And this just really reminded me again of how just having some empathy, caring about somebody, and listening to them can make such a huge impact on their life. Okay, so that's all from me. I've left the link to the website there. We have a bunch of social media pages you're welcome to share, take a look at. And if you want to get in touch with me personally, I've left my email address at the bottom. But I'm happy to take some more questions. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Michelle.
Sorry, Komal.
Yeah. No, it was a nice talk. Yeah, you can continue, Shruti. Yeah.
Hi, Michelle. That was a great talk. I think we had like a lot of good ideas also from here and a lot of learning. So thank you for that. I wanted to ask that one question, that I see that there are very less mentors from India, like as compared to the mentees. So, and we just started our group 2 months back, and it's also based on the similar idea that we want to connect more women with women. And in maths and physics, that is what our first goal is. So we were thinking if we could, because our group has also grown a bit in the past 1-2 weeks. So will it be okay if we could use our platform to ask for mentors for your foundation? I think that would be helpful to everyone.
Absolutely, yeah, and vice versa. I mean, if you want me to send out a message to all our mentors, I'm more than happy to.
Okay, great. Thanks. And also, as we are a very young group, do you have any advice for us how we could have some kind of mentoring in our group, within our group, and we could help other people? So, some advice for the undergrads to help each other out in such situations.
Yeah, yeah. Wow. Okay, so first of all, don't underestimate peer mentoring. This is actually something we want to start developing more of, that just having a space where you can be together as a group. And like you said, you know, in the beginning, have a safe space where you can share is really powerful and really missing in a lot of environments, because usually you might be the only woman in your class, or maybe there's two or three of you, right? So having a space where you can connect with other women at the same career level as you is actually really valuable. And you know, you still all do have different experiences. So someone might say, "Oh, I'm having this problem with this lecturer. You know, he does this, and this." And somebody else might say, "Oh, yeah, I also had something similar. This is what I did." So peer mentoring is really valuable. Um, and then in terms of if you want to set up a more like a similar kind of mentoring program, yeah, you obviously need buy-in from whatever senior faculty, or maybe using postgraduate students. Obviously, they need to be passionate and care in the first place to want to put in this time. Um, one piece of advice that I think is important is that the impetus must be on the mentee to drive the mentoring sessions, to kind of arrange them, to ask the mentor specific questions, to plan for them, etc. Because mentors are like, if you're a faculty in any science career, you're busy all the time. There are so many demands on you, and it tends to be worse for women, because we have, you know, extra demands for talks, or, oh, we need a woman on this committee, so you end up being on like 20 different committees, and so there's huge demands on time. So for like my experience is our mentors are super keen to help. They're really, really passionate about this program, but if they choose a mentee and the mentee kind of never emails them or never contacts them, they just forget about it and move on. So it's really important that the onus is on the mentees to actually make use of this resource, to make use of the mentoring, and to have a very clear idea of what they want to get out of it. So yeah, I think that would be my main pieces of advice.
Okay, thanks a lot, Michelle. Also, one more thing. So, if I'm not connected to a mentor so far, and if I want to approach someone, maybe I've not connected to, or maybe I've connected to someone and I feel that I want to connect with someone else also. So, can I mail them individually, like apart from the organization, just, mail them directly and ask for, maybe just take me as a mentor or something like that? Or does that need to go through the official filling the form process and everything?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely, if you're a mentee in the Supernova Foundation, there's nothing stopping you from contacting a mentor that, you know, you're really interested in their career. I mean, there's a reason we put all the bios on the page, and saying, look, I think you would be a fantastic mentor for me. Would you be interested in mentoring me? That's no problem. Ultimately, in the Supernova Foundation, at least, the mentor does have to actually select the mentee, so that it's kind of on the system and the feedback forms are correct and whatever. But we have often had the case of, you know, all our mentors are full, so there's a big waiting list, and of course we've got mentees who are struggling and need support. And so often a mentee will approach me and say, look, I really need to talk to somebody about XYZ. And then I will send out a request to see, are there any mentors available to have a kind of ad hoc mentoring session? And there's always, like within a day, I usually get 4 or 5 mentors saying, yeah, I can do an extra session, no problem, whatever. So we have a lot of this kind of more informal mentors and mentees approaching each other. and we encourage that. I mean, we're a network, we're a community more than anything else. So it doesn't matter whether it's formal or informal, as long as you are connected and getting the support that you need. So it's really just a matter of, at some point, if you are going to be somebody's mentee, she needs to select you on the system. But other than that, I mean, it can be pretty informal. It's all right.
Okay, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. I think that's all from my side.
Cool. Thanks for the questions.
Yeah, I think I also have a point. Yeah, we can DM anyone on Slack. Like we have a whole list of people. So even if we are not their mentees, we can connect with them. And I think I've done that. I think all of us do that. And we can also post our questions on the common groups as well, where anyone who has a solution to it can answer it. So that's also
Yeah.
great. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, that's really, I think that really is our primary goal, is to build a community. And I think we've managed to do that with Slack. But I think a lot of mentees aren't really aware that this is something that they can use. So it is one of the open questions in setting up the governance, etc., is how to onboard new mentees and mentors so that they understand that they can use Slack in this way and they shouldn't hesitate to reach out. I mean, it's generally a very, very supportive community. So you're unlikely to get turned away if you ask for help.
Hello, I had a question.
Go for
Yeah,
it.
so I just wanted to ask if there is any, as you mentioned that a mentor has to select her mentees, but before that procedure, does does there exist any selection procedure to become a mentee in Supernova Foundation? As in, not chosen by a mentor, but in general, as a mentee, is there any selection procedure, or do you select everyone that a mentor is ready to accept as a mentee?
That's a good question. It's actually also something we're debating at the moment. So the policy at it currently stands is there's a very, very light selection criteria. So you have to be studying a physics related field. So either you're an undergraduate or a postgraduate, and that's it. And you have to identify as a woman or a gender minority. Those are the only requirements. So when you apply, our administrator screens the application for those requirements, and then you can join. And similarly for the mentors, we just say that they have to have a PhD in physics or a physics related field, just because I feel you have to have really walked that path before you can mentor someone in it. And they have to still be working in a physics related field, so not have moved over into industry. But even that requirement's a bit light. You know, we do have some people, I mean, Claudia, for instance, is a science communicator, so she's not an academic, but, you know, it's close enough. So our requirements to join the foundation are very, you know, very small, very light. Then what we do is that we give the mentors the authority to choose their own mentees, because we want them to feel invested in the relationship. So looking at the different profiles, they can choose who they feel they could help the most, or who they feel a good connection with. And you know, if the relationship doesn't work out for whatever reason, they can contact me and change. That's not an issue. So one of the things we've been debating is, should there be, given that we have so many more mentees than we have mentoring capacity, really, should there be more strict requirements? But we really don't. We'd really rather try to restructure things rather than turn people away who might need help. Because even if you don't have a mentor yet, and many of our mentees have been waiting for like a year or more to get a mentor, but at least they can be part of the Slack team. They can ask for help if they need it. They can get access to the webinars, etc. So we're very inclusive in terms of the application process. And you know, we often get like the mentor only has your profile to select on. So sometimes mentees don't put a lot of detail in their profile, and you know, then sometimes they get passed over quite a lot by the mentors. But yeah, in general, mentors will just choose people who are, first of all, in a convenient time zone, but also just speak out to them in terms of their history, their interests, things like that. Yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, I had a question, Michelle. Like you mentioned that, being a female, you have to be part of a lot of committees. So, but there are also cases where there's an all male committee. And being undergrads, we have not yet come to face with that committee. Like we haven't given any big interviews or something. But, there is some fear inside of us that, okay, what if for a PhD or for our later career, we have to give some interviews to an all male committee. What does that mean? Like, does that really give a lot of pressure? And what can be the discriminations in that
Well,
interview?
yeah, so it certainly happens. There are, more often than not, there'll be all male committees. Some universities don't even try, and some do try, but all the women are tied up in other committees and they have no capacity. So it can certainly happen. I don't know if this is a good thing or not, but it turns out women are just as biased against women as men are. Um, in terms of being discriminated against, you've got equal discrimination, so it's fine. No, I'm being facetious, but unfortunately, that is the sad reality, that because of a wide variety of causes, but largely social pressures, very subtle messaging that comes from things we see in media, the way our parents raised us, the way our teachers treated us, all these things add up to stereotypes that every single human being has in their head about different types of people. And these lead to what's called unconscious bias, which means that you can be biased against someone without meaning to be, without thinking about it. And every single one of us, whatever our intentions, has unconscious bias. So the only thing that you can do is try to be aware of it and try to consciously fight against it. It's very, very difficult. And this is why things like double blinding are very helpful, etc. So in a way, I attempt to encourage you by saying that even if I try to encourage you, but in a very discouraging way, that even if there are women on the committee, it may not actually mean that you're not being discriminated against. It is obviously much better to have women on the committee because diversity in all these decision-making things is only a good thing. People come with different ideas, different points of view. That's actually really what's important. So unfortunately, it's possible that you will face discrimination no matter what, right? So what I hope that you take away from that is to not be any more scared of an all-male committee than you might otherwise be. So even though that it's quite a negative thing that everybody has unconscious bias, it means that this may not necessarily be worse for you than anything else. So to be honest, as a woman in physics, you are going to have situations where you are in the minority. You're going to go to conferences. I mean, there are entire conference series that I simply stopped going to because they were like 10 to 20% women. It's just the numbers were just too low. I felt uncomfortable. I didn't want to go back. You will face it. There will be situations where you are going to be very much the minority. Or like the first, when I started as faculty in my previous job, it was an all-male group. And it's difficult. You notice the microaggressions. You notice the lack of respect, the default lack of respect. The small things, you do notice them. And that's hard. It's always going to be hard. But the important thing is to get your vaccine. So get some role models, get some mentors, get together with the women in this group, make sure have a good session about it, saying, oh, my committee was all male. Oh, that's the worst. So you feel better about it, but keep going. Don't give up, because it's situations that's going to happen. you are going to face discrimination that will be unintentional 99% of the time. None of us mean to do this, but it does just happen. And so the important thing is to have the courage to keep going, to keep at it, because it's worth it at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think that's really one of the hardest parts. So I've had like male classmates come up to me and be like, "Oh, have you experienced any discrimination in your institute?" And I'm like, it's much more subtle in the sense that you don't experience outlandish discrimination in the sense, but you get the microaggression, you get the expectation to do much better than your colleagues, to get the same amount of respect that males seem to somehow unconsciously get from your professors and your teachers. It's much harder to explain these subtle implicit biases that people have, and it's pretty hard. It's not that visible, so it's much harder to understand if you have not actually faced it.
Yeah, I completely agree. And something to take from that is actually a very positive thing, that my generation already has it a lot easier than the generation that came before me. Your generation has it even easier. Things, even though the numbers don't necessarily reflect it, the attitudes are getting a lot better. You're much less likely to be openly discriminated against. I mean,
Right.
I knew a woman who had got her first internship at an engineering company, and the one guy just straight out walked up to her, just said to her, "You shouldn't be here. Engineering isn't for women. You should just leave." Just outright. And so I think one positive thing is that's very unlikely to happen today. I hope it's less likely. So a positive thing to take from that is the overt aggression and the overt discrimination is getting better. So that's great. I feel like, when I look at my senior mentors, the women who've come before me, the things that they had to face to get to where they are and to create the community that I now get to enjoy is amazing. So we can thank them. We can thank the previous generations for that. But there's still a lot of issues. There's still a lot of discrimination. There's, like you said, it can be really subtle. And I think this is why it's so important to have these groups where you can speak to someone who's also experienced that, who says, "Oh yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, you're not," like, often, like 90% of the time, we just need to say to each other, am I being crazy? No, you're not being crazy. That is a problem. And just to have somebody kind of give you that affirmation that this is something real that you have experienced and it is a problem.
Yeah, that's very true. I would not be exaggerating when I say that the Supernova Foundation has had a great impact on my life. I think most of us here in the meeting can agree that we don't have role models in academia with whom we can interact on such a frequent basis. And honestly, as rare real life role models are, it's no better at our level. I think there's about 10 girls in my class out of a total of 70. So the numbers are still bad, but I think they're improving, and we can only hope that the upward trend continues that way.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it's still very much a problem. And if anybody says to you, if any man or anyone comes to you and says, "Oh no, there isn't an equality problem anymore," just be like, "Well, why this dropout? Why is it that when you go to a young enough age, girls and boys are just as excited and passionate about maths and science as each other? There's no difference between them. So why would this happen if not because of societal influences?" So we keep fighting. We keep going. My dream is, by the time I retire, the Supernova Foundation will have had a big impact, and I really just hope that it probably won't be equal, but I really just hope it will be better than what it is today.
Yeah,
Thank you so much, Michelle. Yeah. Go ahead, Summer.
Yeah, one doesn't understand the benefit of something unless one experiences it. So unless and until I've had experienced mentoring, I won't understand what changes it will bring to my life. So yeah, this experience was really good, having mentoring sessions and attending webinars and feeling like, okay, this is okay to not feel good about yourself sometimes, and all those feelings, and like not being aware of various things around you, and this helped a lot, and the foundation did a really great job, right? From making webinars on writing how to write a good CV to how to manage time. Like my personal experience that I was not being able to manage my time anyway, and I used to have like breakdowns. So how will I do this? How will I do that? And then there was a session on time management, and then I attended that, and it was really good. Like, and to attend that, and yeah, like listen about how others manage their time. It was really good.
That's awesome. I'm just gonna
Yeah.
stop sharing my screen so I can
Yeah,
see yours
sure.
safely.
Yeah. Does anyone have any other questions? We can have them.
I just wanted to say it's really nice to hear that kind of feedback, because most of the time the foundation just sort of happens by itself, and I hear when something goes wrong, but I don't always hear when things are going right. So it's sometimes I'm like, are people still doing things? Are they still mentoring? Is it still happening? So it's really nice to hear that it's all working as it's supposed to, and you're getting a lot out of it. I'm glad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, yeah. So yeah, maybe we can conclude it. Like if no one has any questions. Yeah, Shanmali. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we can wrap it up now.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, Michelle, for giving your time for this discussion and the talk. It was really great to hear from you. And it was really great that we could share this with others who are not a part of the foundation yet. So I would actually ask if everyone could open their cameras and if we could take a screenshot at the end of the session, just have everyone's faces, everyone who's here. Yeah.
It's nice to see you all.
Okay, I'll go ahead and take a screenshot. You can fully remember this. Okay, thank you so much, everyone. This was a great experience. Thank you so much, Michelle. And
It's a
hope to
pleasure.
catch you later. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Michelle, for your time. We are really grateful. We had one wonderful session. Does Aniket have a question? Like, oh, okay, thumbs up. Okay, reviews for the talk. Yeah, and also Michelle, like, can you like? I just had a suggestion. Like, what if we increase the number of mentors? Like, should the foundation work on that? In that direction a bit more.
We actively try. We do. We
Yeah.
really do. We advertise at we actually haven't done an application drive in a little while because we're kind of restructuring the governance. But we advertise at institutes, send mailing lists. We're on social media, etc. But if you think about it, there's always going to be more mentees than mentors.
Yeah.
There's so many more students than there are women with PhDs.
And
So,
hopefully that's the trend we want, right? We do want more mentees.
yeah, exactly. So what we are doing at the moment is looking into restructuring things so that a mentor could take more mentees, and instead of just having private sessions, have like a little group session, and then if her mentee says, oh, actually I want to talk to you in private about this, then you can set up a separate session. But that's also nice because then you can get more of the mentees to meet each other. So that's kind of what we settled on as a way to basically expand our capacity. Because the ratio is not actually as bad as it appears. It's about 2 mentees. It is about 2 mentees to each mentor, a little bit more maybe. But we've also had some mentors who just didn't select mentees. So I've been chasing them up as well. But it's always the case where sometimes people just don't engage. They sign up, oh, this is a great thing, and then they forget about it, they get busy, whatever. It's fine, it happens. But I think if we allow a little bit of extra capacity in our mentors, we will be able to match the demand. That's the hope anyway.
Yeah. I think it would also work in a great way if like senior PhD who are about in their 3rd year mentor undergraduates instead of them just being mentees, like
Yes.
the one we were talking about during the interview. Yeah, that would be
Yeah.
also a very good solution to this.
We actually do have like a kind of transition phase. We're actually starting to see it now. It's very exciting because the program started only 2017. So it's only now that some of our mentees are starting to transition. So now
Right.
they're getting postdocs overseas. So we're like,
Oh,
hey,
nice.
come be a mentor. So it's starting to happen. And I do, even though we have a policy like you have to have a PhD to be a mentor, for ones who've been in the program, we're a bit more relaxed. So once you get to kind of senior PhD stage, yeah, you can definitely be a mentee. And what we find is that once a mentee has a mentor, even if the mentor selects somebody else, she's her mentor for life, right? You know, anytime you've built that relationship, so anytime you need something, you can just contact your previous mentor at any stage in your career. So you never actually lose that relationship. It's just less regular.
That's very right. I can't think of the countless number of times my mentor has helped me out. I've sent her a mail and be like, look over the CV and have the application deadline tomorrow. And she's been like, all right. So she's just so great that way. Like,
Amazing. I'm so glad. Okay.
right. So I guess we can end it now. We've already been 10
Yeah.
minutes out of schedule.
Yeah.
So
It was great.
Yeah.
thank
I'm
you
glad
so
you
much
guys
again.
had lots of questions. It was really great. It was lovely to meet you all.
Yeah. Thank you, Michelle. Yeah. And thank you, everyone, for coming here. Yeah. Okay. Can
Thanks so much.
conclude it.
Thank
Yeah.
you so
Bye.
much. Bye, everyone. Bye.